about all the different facets of the globalist destabilization program in the Middle East with investigative journalist, formerly with the National Security Agency, Wayne-Madsen. And we're going to go to your phone calls here in a moment, then segue and get his take on the Fukushima unfolding crisis that's worsening right now. The press reports show, but it's not the big news item now because everybody loves a new war. It's so entertaining and makes a lot of men out there feel good about themselves through the New World Order that controls our country and that is bankrupting us. There's a lot of high-fiving. A lot of people are watching it at bars, and they're not watching sports right now. They're very, very excited and feeling powerful through this mass murder. They're also celebrating and feeling very proud about photos of U.S. kill teams with dead children that they pose with. This is our journey into evil. Very sick to see America turn into an instrument of the globalist. But this London Telegraph article came out Sunday. We also wrote about it before they did. I'm proud of that fact. U.S. government backs Libyan al-Qaeda while hyping terror attacks inside U.S. And here's the London Telegraph. The West and al-Qaeda on the same side. CNN also ran a similar headline. But the big issue came out today, and they're certainly pushing this now, Wayne. U.S. eyes Gaddafi terror response, and if they have indeed killed one of his sons, as they killed his daughter decades ago, he might actually do something, which then allows them to, in the minds of people, how dare him fight back? That's terror. Then launch a ground invasion. That's why they're so arrogant and full of bravado right now, in my view. And the White House memos talk about how great a terror attack would be to boost overall police state approval ratings for the TSA, who's on the ropes, the federal police state, the spy grid. I see it in the cards for them to stage a false flag or allow it to take place to try to bolster their expanded takeover. Wayne-Madsen, your take on that?
Well, I think it's hogwash. Gaddafi was linked to some terrorist groups, but we're talking about the 1980s, and of course he was the bad guy du jour in those days, linked to the Irish Republican Army and the Baas terrorists. But he gave all these networks up in return for having this new deal with these Western countries. So I think the idea that Gaddafi, who's basically got enough to worry about inside Libya, could somehow call up these old cells from the 1980s and 70s is just ridiculous. It's more neocon propaganda.
But what about the issue of the neocons staging a terror attack as an excuse to ground invade and to crack down domestically?
Well, I think that's always a fear from the neocons. I mean, that's how they operate. That's their modus operandi. We've seen it time and time again in so many of these false flag attacks. So the mere thought that they're saying, well, Gaddafi may go the terrorist route, I think is trying to lay the groundwork for that distinct possibility that we may see something happen in Europe or the United States. More likely it would happen in Europe, and more likely it would happen in one of the countries that was not keen on getting involved in this adventure, and that would be Germany, Turkey, and a few other NATO countries who just didn't want any part of this.
Exactly. And, folks, it's been declassified that our criminal government stages terror attacks on a routine basis. That is a fact. One of the chief ones, Gulf of Tonkin, to get us into Vietnam. Let's talk to Tim in Washington. No, Marshall in Texas is first. Marshall in Texas, you're on the air.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I just want to bring up, you spoke earlier on in the show when you spoke of Libya, that they were going under the guise of humanitarianism. This might set the precedent for them to do so here under unrest, whether it be the government creating the unrest and coming down on us, or whether it be just to set the precedent that they need to be the ones coming in so that this doesn't happen.
Well, we saw what happened yesterday in Lafayette Park. Peaceful pro-war and anti-war protesters kettled and arrested in mass. No protest allowed in America. The very tyranny they're decrying in Libya. Wayne-Madsen.
Well, absolutely. And, talk about, going into a country under the guise of humanitarian assistance. Remember, when George H.W. Bush was a lame duck president at the end of 1992, he went into Somalia supposedly for humanitarian purposes. And then when Bill Clinton became president, he decides he's going to start to do nation building, which we saw 18 U.S. Army Rangers killed in Mogadishu as a result of that entirely messed up operation. Now, we've been there before. We went into Haiti, I don't know how many times, quote unquote, for humanitarian missions. It isn't funny. Obama, he had no problem with Baby Doc going back to Haiti, but he didn't want the rightful president who was ousted in a U.S. coup, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, returning from exile imposed by the United States and France and South Africa. So we have humanitarian. Look, U.S. Agency for International Development, which is the big humanitarian organization, is nothing more than a CIA front and has been for a long time. And we know whose mom, dear old mom, worked for them for many years, and that was Stanley Ann Dunham, Obama, Soetoro, whatever, how many names she had. But
thank you, Marshall. I want to go to Tim, Ben, and JB and others here, and then we'll keep you to the bottom of the hour before our next guest, because I want to spend that next little 5-minute segment on the reactor continual meltdown that's happening. But in your gut, Wayne, watching this for a long time, reporting from Capitol Hill, calling a lot of things before they happen, in your gut, how do you see this ending? What are the different scenarios, and what do you think most probable among them?
Well, I think what we're going to see is a U.S. military, U.S., British, French, and some Italian military involvement in this, what is essentially now a civil war in Libya. I think we're going to see a pro U.S. Western government installed, at least in Benghazi. I don't know how long Gaddafi can hold on. There are reports that he had mercenaries from other countries in Libya. But if this goes to a full scale military occupation invasion, I think Gaddafi just can't hold out that much longer. He's got basically Tripoli, and now the rebels are moving to reclaim some of the cities his forces took in the last couple of weeks.
So basically the globalist-backed forces started losing, and so the big air power came in to back them.
Yeah, and I think they've got a lot of Ahmed Chalabi. He's a guy we put in Iraq, sort of an international con artist and crook. We've got a lot of Libyans who have lived outside of Libya for a number of years in London and Washington and elsewhere. I think we're probably going to see an attempt to put one of those characters in charge in Libya, and he'll be every bit in our court as that puppet guy we have in Iraq right now. Well,
and of course, Iraq's now one of the only Arab countries actually endorsing this. The Arab League and its support has fallen apart. They were all for a no-fly zone, but not for the bombardment and the special forces there on the ground. But I do see them trying to at least break the country in two from the east, and then continue to launch attacks from the east. Cameron, the British Prime Minister, has basically echoed that, saying that the bombardment is all that's going to be happening, and that the Libyans better, quote, decide this for themselves. So they're telling the rebels, it's up to you now.
Right. Well, I think the rebels probably, now that we've changed the game with Tomahawk cruise missiles. Isn't that nice? The United States likes to use standoff weapons at first because it's easy to push a button and kill 50 people on the other end of that Tomahawk cruise missile. But eventually, I think we're going to see some of our ground troops. They're probably already there. We don't know about it yet. And as you mentioned, the heinous crimes being committed in places like Afghanistan against civilians, we're probably seeing that already happen in Libya, except it's not being reported.
Tim in Washington, you're on the air with Wayne Madsen.
Hey, how's it going, Alex? I had a couple points for you real fast, and I was just kind of curious on my math here, because according to my math, that Chernobyl meltdown for 10 days with all the reactors compiled, we were looking at a total of 32 Chernobyl days so far in Fukushima due to its rate of...
Most of the physicists and doctors we've had on have said that this is bigger than Chernobyl, and that there's been a whole bunch of, it was 4 reactors with partial meltdowns, 600,000 plus spent fuel rods sprayed everywhere. Wayne, what's your take on this?
Well, I think obviously we know that just like with Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island, what we're getting is being downplayed by the politicians and the very powerful nuclear power industry. This is a very, very powerful lobby because unlike other energy lobbies, they have to deal with the government to get the nuclear material to start these plants. So there's already too close of a relationship between the industry and the government. I think basically what I'm hearing from people in Japan, it is much worse. Of course, the Japanese broadcaster NHK is run by the government, and they've been downplaying a lot of this also. But the private media is telling me that it is much worse. We're talking about the Tokyo metropolitan region, Tokyo, Yokohama. People are now leaving. The Swiss embassy has moved the embassy from Tokyo to Osaka.
So has the U.S. military. What does that tell you about how serious this really is?
That it's very serious.
And they're telling us the fallout's no big deal on the West Coast when the real radiation hasn't even gotten here yet.
Well, and we've had our politicians tell us that 3 Mile Island in 1979, Governor Thornburg of Pennsylvania stated, he said there's no problem. He waited 3 days before telling pregnant women around 3 Mile Island that it's time for you to evacuate when he knew how bad it was 3 days prior. So we've seen this play out so many times. Chernobyl, the cover-up by the Soviet government, helped lead to their demise because they covered that up. But anytime we see these reactor incidents, and well, now we know TEPCO was fudging on the safety inspections because TEPCO is very close to the government oversight.
Yeah, stay there. We're going to come right back. Did that? Do you have anything else to add, Tim, in Washington?
Yes, I got a couple other things, if you don't mind.
Yeah, stay there. Tim, straight ahead. We'll try to cram in a few others. And we'll continue with the calls when Tarpley joins us as well. One more segment with Wayne Madsen. I'm Alex Jones, Infowars.com.